Okay, so now we've gone switch straight back to the white. It's probably a third thinners to 2/3 model air, so it's still quite thin. So you should be able to get some nice sort of sharpness with it. Just play with your air pressures just a little bit. You want it to be coming out, and what I've been doing really is going around touching in those dark areas. So as you can see, it's a little bit cricky as you can hear it, but there we go. Now, okay, still don't panic. When you're dealing with real heavy weathering, don't forget, you know, if you didn't like any of this, you could just go back and do it again. But as you can see from the inside, I want this to be pretty much a nice, well worn, well sort of, you know, well cared for in a lot of ways. It sounds funny, but the corrosion work's got lots of it done, so it's been well looked after and everything in. So you've just got a mixture. So we've gone for, i.e. the white work has got grimy, it's got dirty, and then there's another coat gone over the top and various so forth and so on. So you're in a situation where you've got something else like this where, you know, it's very blotchy. So as you can see, you've probably got nice shiny white areas which we're putting in, but we're just trying to make sure they're faded in just a little bit. Okay, so just make sure you've got no hard edges, and you can just run it around like this, and we're just going to take it around, and every now and again pause in an area perhaps and give it a little bit more. Okay, and you're just going to take it to a level where you're happy. Okay, and so if you want to, you know, say up here, this you're thinking, you know, perhaps this area here is a little bit strong, we can say, okay, well look, we'll sharpen it in a little bit, okay, and just take it back, you know, and just like that. So you can really work it as you like. Now this area is still quite soft. What it needs is obviously a wash which will sharpen it up, because then all the rivets will fill up with it, all the panel lines, and it will give you a nice hard edge, but this will give it a soft edge all the way around it. But what you want to do is be a level that you're comfortable with. So, you know, something like this, I've come back and forth a few times on there, so you know, some people might think it's too heavy, some people might think the contrast is too much. So if you thought that, you could obviously just spray the entire thing in thin white paint right the way over to knock it down a bit. And perhaps I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, all right, perhaps this back area is a little bit, you know, off, so we're just going to knock that back just a little bit. We're not trying to kill it off, we're just trying to take it back, so we'll just do the entire rear edge like that. Okay, and perhaps we'll think, all right, we'll just lighten up these areas in the middle of these panels just a touch, pick out perhaps some areas, you know, just around here, perhaps some of these leading edges, just to give you a difference. And that's all you're trying to do, is really just break it up until you're happy with what you've got. So like under here, this back area, then we'll just blend it through so it's the same as the top. We just need to up the air pressure just a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to take that back just a little bit of paint just along these, just going to fade these back a little bit, just going over the tops. And don't forget, like pre-shading, it will come back again, so don't worry too much. But perhaps we'll whiten up these centres a little bit more, centre back here, this edge, you know, perhaps we'll pick out a few bits and pieces. And all you're trying to do is give it depth, okay, into the paint. And it's one of those things, as I say, you know, I've done now, this is what, my third pass all over this one. Let them dry for a bit, come back. So do exactly the same for the inside, so got some white going on in there as on the outside, but again you might think, yeah, a little bit heavy, so I just want to take that back just a little bit. So perhaps we'll just come over the top. Okay, just knock it back, just lightly dance almost over it so it will come back. Okay, okay, we've just lightened it up just a bit, but you've got now that nice depth of different coloured paints, which would be almost impossible to do without doing it this way. Okay, so it's just a case of taking your time, going around, lightening it up and working your way through. So, you know, obviously this one over here is one I did before, and all we're going to do now is just literally pick out some areas. So this rear, quite nice and clean. This mid, perhaps a little bit strong. This section's just down here. These leading edge ones. And again, we're just going to pick out some cleaner areas than others. Okay, just to try and knock it back a little bit. Okay. So it's a mixture of doing retouching work, like on here, and covering it up. Okay, so you're trying to do touch-ins so it looks like, you know, it's had work and it's been prayed over, or you've overdone it too much and you want to fade it off a little bit. A good example of that is just here at the front where I've slightly overdone. You might be able to see around here these intakes. So what I'm going to do is just take them back just a little bit. So if you up your air pressure, okay, and we're just going to put thin coats, punchy coats right over them, okay, and that will hopefully just knock it back just a little bit, but it will come back through pre-shading and those areas, just down the mid here, okay, just underneath, and there we go, we're out of paint, so we're happy. All right, and it just gives us that type of effect. Now this will come back, but obviously not as strong. But I want to keep these bays quite grubby and dirty because we're going to have the engine out. We want to make it look like it's been knocked around a little bit. But hopefully, as you can see, we've got a very nice balance working right the way over. So now what we're going to do, let this totally dry, and we can do just exactly the same to the top. Okay, so we're going to come back with the original colour, thin it around about 30% thinners to paint. With this, because using the gun stuff, you might need to thin it a little bit more, okay, but keep it nice and sharp and punchy, go right the way over it and do it just like that. So it just be exactly the same as we've done with the white. The white's the hardest, to be honest, because it's so in your face. Everywhere else is a little bit more easy. Once those are done, we're going to leave it then for around about 24 hours to totally go off. We're going to give it a couple of coats of Johnson's Clear, which I'll do with you. We'll give it another 24 hours to go off again. Then we can get the decals onto it. Now the decals we're going to weather in, and we're going to do all types of things with them to make it look like this. As soon as they're on, we can then recoat another couple of days and we get through. So it's a long drawn out period, but you need that drying time between the paints because we are using Guns paints, we're using, you know, Vallejo paints, we're going to be using clear coats on top. Those all need to dry to go down and be fine before you move on with the next ones. Okay, so there we go, we're looking really, really nice. It had a couple of coats of Future, 2 coats of Future to be honest, all the way over absolutely everything. So I did the wings, we did the actual main fuselage and all the little bits and pieces as well. Now, a couple of things you might be able to see here. We've done the work on the front here for these, this is like the de-icing area, the leading edge of the wings. To be honest, it's a little bit light, but there is method in the madness here. We're going to weather this with quite a heavy, dark, even black wash. So this will grind down and go darker. And this is part of the weathering we're going to go for. So what I've actually decided to do is lighten it up slightly more than it normally is. So we've done the radome, which is here, which is in this sort of radome tan colour, which is pretty much spot on when you look at it. It's just that at the moment it's far too universal in that, but I think the wash will give it its griminess, give it its general decay and look to it. But as I said, if you started off with the said colour to start with, what's going to happen is it's going to get darker than it really would be, and we're going to end up with something I think is going to look more yellow than sort of that radome tan colour. Apart from that, really happy with how everything else came out. Now it's all totally dry. We can see we've got this nice down here with the engine bays and everything else with it, and generally no problems with it anywhere at all. Really happy with it. So what we're going to do now is decal it. Part of the reason for decaling it is so when the next layers of weathering goes on, it's going to weather those decals down, which is something we're going to talk about. Now we've covered decaling a million times before, so I'm not going to bore you with it. Okay, there's standalone videos on using it and how to do it anyway, so we just have a quick go over putting down 1 or 2 of them. The big problem one will be, if you're doing this particular build, is going to be this one on the tail. That's because on the tail itself, this is quite a large lump to get it to conform round. So I think if I'm going to show you one thing, that's probably the one way to do it. So usual way of doing it, we've got warm water here. It's quite warm. A little bit warmer than I would normally have because we need this decal to bend. Because we need it to bend, we're also going to be using a lot of Micro Industries setting solutions and softening solutions. So the usual thing, the one that says set is actually a softener, and the one that says sol is actually the setting solution that goes on afterwards. But it's one of these ones, it's going to be a case of taking your time with it. Now we've got a couple of things out which we'll show you in a minute. This is why they're cut off, but these very large marking ones just round here. So what we're going to do to start with, in our usual way, is just cut out, leaving a good gap around things, and certainly somewhere where you can get hold of it with some spring-loaded clamps. Okay, but get rid of any wording like we've got down here, the number 17, we want that to go. Okay, and we've got the aircraft number 510. So as you can see, because it's flat, it's going to go in, but you can probably see it's in a two-piece. So this is the rudder section we've got down the back, and we've got the main part on there. What this means though is this bit has to fit exactly in the right area and allowing for the conforming of the part and for actually it to bend down. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do it all in one. We've got the water just here, we put it down face in and give it a nudge. Now, because the water is a little bit warmer than normal, okay, I haven't put any micro set in there to start with. We're going to do that actually afterwards. So what we've got here, I'm hoping we'll be able to balance this up a little bit, okay, is the tail. So we've just got it in here, then we're just going to flip it over. Now, to be honest, I've already done some of the decals on these, and these are absolutely lovely, and they don't take very long at all to sort of come off of the backing paper, and you can probably see already it's slipping in here. So what we're going to do, we'll do the small area first. So using a clean brush, we've just got warm water on it like this, okay, and then all we're going to do is come along and just brush it on the tail area, quite a bit of it, and just try and keep it smooth down on there just like that. Then we're going to pick up the decal itself, stuck to the thing, and we're just going to slip it onto the tail, okay, and we're just going to roughly position it. Now, because we've got this bent round a little bit, as you'll see, when you move the rudder, that's where we want it to be. Okay, so we're just making sure when the rudder is central that there is no gap, or if there is a gap, it's very, very small. So that one's in. Then we're just going to take a cotton bud, okay, just on there, and we're just going to roll it, starting on the inside and then rolling to the outside so all the water pushes out. Okay, then that can be sitting there. So then same thing again. Okay, this one is a large area on here, so we're just going to do lots of water over everything. And because you've got it where it comes off here, you want to put it down onto the wing. It's a little bit tricky, this shape. Okay, onto the tail just like this, and then drag it outwards. Okay, so we're just going to pop it down there just for a minute and dragging it out. Because it's a nice large, and it, to be honest, is one of the thinnest decals I've ever seen them do, we're just going to keep it quite wet. Okay, and we're just going to nudge it into place. Okay, so we're going to start at the bottom and get this lower half in. As soon as it starts to drag and get a little bit problematic to get it to go. Okay, but you can probably see, even with the brush under it, you can see right through this decal. Okay, so we've got his back legs, everything on there. So now what we're going to do is brush forward to making sure it all goes in and levels up. Now we're just going to dab it. We're not going to push it and rolling it around. It's just a little dabbing motion to get it to drag into and to conform in, and because we've done it in quite warm water, the decal itself is quite soft. Okay, so now we're just gonna little movements, and as you can see it's pulling from the top slightly, so we're just gonna pull it round and we're just gonna push in this top one, because we don't want the decal to stretch too much, because if it stretches too much we're gonna have a bit of a problem on our hands. Okay, because what will happen is it'll just, the shape, it will just completely go out of shape. Okay, happy with how that's on there now. So what we're going to do is just starting from the inside, just pushing out. Okay, getting rid of all the bubbles and the water, and we're just starting from one end and working out. But the big thing you have to remember, these are very, very thin decals, and just like there we've got a small tear just appeared. Okay, it's not a problem because we can take care of that afterwards, but this is the trouble, it's very, very fine, very, very thin, but we need to get the water out because it's so big. We don't want it to end up with a pocket underneath it. Okay, so what we just need to do now is just pinch this slightly together, because we can touch it up with a little bit of paint or weather it, which would probably be my preferred way of doing it. Okay, and that is on. So what we're going to do, let that dry around about sort of 10 minutes just to start to dry off and everything else like that. I wouldn't advise going around doing the other side for the moment, but you could certainly do other decals as you move around. And then once it's dried on there for about 10 minutes, you can come along and actually just give it the micro set and sole again right the way over the top of both of them. This will then soften it, help it sit down, bed down. But these decals are probably some of the finest I've ever seen trumpeter put in a kit. They are very, very thin, very, very fragile. But what that means is they're going to conform and go down really, really well. Now, once they've been on now for around about, as I say, an hour, 2 hours to totally go off, give it another coat of the micro sole or the setting solution that you're using, and then leave it completely overnight. When you come back, you should come back, we've done this one down here, to something like this. Okay, so we've done these on here, we've got the no steps on there, on the one on here, but what we want to do is sort of fade it down. So what the easiest way to do that is to take something like a polishing sponge. Okay, so we've got a nice new polishing sponge here, wet it, and then just gonna lightly sand the decal. Now we don't want to sand right through it, but immediately, hopefully you can see on one of these, that it picks up a blue hint, and that's because you're sanding it away, but the whiteness around the outside is also filling in all the little holes. So if I just move this one down a little bit, hopefully you can see what we're doing. Okay, so you go around and we're just sanding it all in. Don't worry about that blue because it'll all go, but you're cutting it back, and also you are sanding off the carrier film. But that's the thing, don't go too far because you don't want to totally go through. But hopefully you can see now, all the dust in that has gone into all the riveting detail, so it looks like it's painted on. Then all we do, take a clean bit of tissue, okay, a kitchen towel, and just give it a rub and get rid of the blue from the white. Dry it back, and then hopefully you can see you've got a very nice effect. And I know looking at the camera there it looks very, very blue, but trust me, it's actually faded it in just a little bit. Now there's various things we're going to carry on doing with this. We're going to come along and we're going to do things like actually go on and put some dirt over it, some grime, obviously the shading, but hopefully you can see on this one, we've done it to this one as well a little bit, we'll just do a bit more. So again, we're just going to wet it, little circular motions, but you need a fine paper, sandpaper. You don't want to be going in here too heavy. You've got a little bit of white coming through on the red just there, but this will just knock it back, give it a scuffed appearance, but if you wet it, you'll get a finer sanded back look. And it'll just wear off perhaps some of the edges and make it look like it's worn down where it's been painted on and things like that. So hopefully, as you can see, got it down there looking a little bit more worn. Again, you've got some bit of blue coming around everything now, but if we give it a wipe off, what we're actually doing is filling in a lot of this riveting detail with this. Just dry it back, and hopefully you can see they're coming in. So you could go around and just sand all your decals, which is something we're going to do. So there we go, time for the decaling fun. Loads of fun, a few hours sat down with your favourite music on and go through it. Just remember, let the decals settle down on their own before you come along and put in setting solutions onto them. Also make sure you're happy, okay? This way, if it sort of goes wrong a bit, you've got time to get them off and manoeuvre them and everything else. But when you're sanding them, make sure they've gone off for at least 24 hours. To be honest, I did this one a day before. We've come in to do the rest of them now, and it's sanded and gone down really, really nicely. But hopefully, as you can see, no problem. You can do the same for the no steps as well, perhaps take a bit of chunk of them out and everything else, but we're going to come along and obviously with a wash and with grime and then obviously a little bit of post shading, we'll be able to fade those in and make them look really the part. Okay, so we're getting on with the decaling and everything else like that, but there's a couple of areas on here where the call out for it, we've got like the black band, as we can see down the front here, with the red behind. Okay, red behind we can do at any point, but certainly the black we need to go down first. We've also got to do this black masking around the front end. A little bit odd on this one. I can't find an actual reference of having it quite like that. Normally it comes up onto the actual seal itself, so I'm doing it on the seal itself. I'm going to leave it open slightly at the front so we get a good one through. Other thing as well, walkways. Normally they're a decal. You can understand why, is because we've got quite a strange concave shape on here, so it's probably easier to spray it in. The other thing as well is when I was doing it, the ones you'll spot in here, you might notice we've got an extra bit of white been added. I got it wrong. I didn't actually do it. It's the actual top of the spoiler that obviously goes up when they're landing and turning and things like that on there. I didn't paint, but obviously to marry up with the wing, it does need to be there as well. So we've done that one, got that one sorted, and we touched them up a little bit earlier on. Decaling's going quite well. They are extremely thin and they are tearing and breaking all over the place, but luckily I haven't lost one as of yet. Fingers crossed we'll be okay. So we've got to do this black work. So usual thing, we're not going to use black itself. For just around the front here, what we're going to do is use a little bit of NATO black. He says, looking for it, here it is. No, that's the US Air Force dark grey. We've got the NATO black. So we've got the NATO black just here. All right, so what we're going to do is just do round the front areas to start with using this. Now, I've got a little bit of white paint still from earlier, as you can see in here. So what we're going to do is add that onto the black. Okay, and we're just going to let it go through. We're not even going to mix it or anything else like that. Okay, so we just got our thing, so we just got the white coming through and the black comes in. Because it's got a bit of a marbling effect with both the paints in there, hopefully it will give us a bit of a texture to it. So we haven't, a little bit fiddly to try and show here, let's do it down this camera. As you can see down inside, we haven't masked up the inside. What I'm going to do is overshoot, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of wrap round, but nothing too much. So we just grab this down here. So to start with, we're just going to do this top area. Okay, just a bit of grey coming through now. So keeping it quite plastered on, making sure we go everywhere. But the idea is of having a little bit of different colour in there. Hopefully it will come through. So it's looking wet. We're very high air pressure, so we're just going to dry back on this entire area. And what we're going to do now is just shoot very light coat on these intakes. So there we go. Let's blaze that through. Back over the top area again. Okay, it's a little bit hard to get all the way around here. Alright, so we're just looking across. Now we've got to do the little front edge of it, but I'm hoping we can do that slightly by hand. Okay, so there we go. Just got a bit down in there. What we do, just bumping it down the front. So sort of shooting it across. Something just like that. Alright, so we just need a little bit more on the fronts. Just a tiny bit more on that. Okay, so we've got a little bit of overspray up in there, but we can actually take care of that. But it's given us a nice edge on the front, so we should be able to just easily blow through from the inside and blow it clean out just to take care of all of those areas. So now we've got the walkways at the back. So for the minute, I'm just going to put down a very high air pressure, dusty coat onto this whilst it runs out. which is done. And then we're going to switch paints over to the Tamiya rubber, which we had here. So this is the rubber black, but it hopefully it will be quite lumpy and horrible. And the idea is we spray at such a high air pressure and from a little bit of distance that it will be quite gritty and grainy, and all those types of things you normally don't want is what we actually want. Okay, so we just grab our paint, not going to need much, neat into here. What you could do is let it actually dry in your colour cup a little bit so it gets really, really thick, but we're just maxing out the air pressure on everything. So we're not going to flood it, we're just coming it in from the side here, very little amount, so it's all air. So hopefully this will be really gritty. It's actually working quite well. We can just build up a light layer on this one to give us quite a nasty layer. Then what we'll do is we can dry brush this. Okay, and the other side. I think by dry brushing just a tiny bit of grey on this, it should give us what we're after. And there we go, but as you can see they are very dusty looking just down there on the top. So what we can do now is just have a quick unmask. But that was the idea with lots of heavy masking there. Because it is such a dusty thing, it's going to travel. We knew it was going to be a problem, so that's why we've done it like that. But I don't know how well the camera will pick up the texture. If we just do this one here, as I say, hopefully it's got that very, very thick look to it, and looking at it I can see lumps and stipply bits, and it is quite rough. Obviously I won't touch it because it might come off, but it gives us a very nice dead flat finish you can imagine. And I think with a very, very light brush of grey over it, that'll get caught on the texture on the surface and it'll give us a very nice three-dimensional effect. So right, we're going to let those bits dry off. Can carry on now. I deliberately left this centre area that we haven't done any mask decal work on it because I've been handling it, but certainly the decals are on the bottom now. They've got all those important ones on the back there all on. Then we can finish off, get the decals around the front, and then finally we can start really getting it together.